I don't know, man, to be honest with you. I don't really think about that. I just think about working hard, keep stepping up, and then keep up in the rankings, and then keep proving ourselves in a boxing changes. So, quick man, David Ben's final day of training camp before his highly anticipated fight with David Morrell was nothing short of intense. Inside his gym in Phoenix, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation as Benavidez prepared for the biggest challenge of his career. The two-time WBC super middleweight champion is known for his relentless pressure-sharp boxing and impressive stamina, and he was making sure to leave no stone unturned as he fine-tuned his skills. In the final hours before the fight, music. The session began with a fierce round of sparring where Benavidez faced off against opponents specifically chosen for their ability to mimic Morrell's southpaw style. The goal was to simulate what he would experience on fight night, and Benavidez didn't hold back. He unleashed a flurry of punches, doubling up on jabs, landing crisp right hands, and following up with devastating body shots. His movement was smooth and purposeful as he worked on cutting off the ring. Ensuring that Morrell wouldn't be able to escape his pressure, Ben's opponents were quick and tried to dance around him, but he stayed right on top of them, not giving them a second to breathe. Music, applause. Ben's father and trainer Jose Benavidez Sr. watched closely from the sidelines, offering advice and coaching in between rounds. The sparring wasn't just about power, it was about strategy. Benavidez was focusing on making adjustments to deal with the tricky southpaw stance of Morrell, shifting his footwork and defensive positioning to stay one step ahead the pace. Was relentless, pushing Bennett to his limits as the rounds ticked by without a break. It was clear that he was preparing for a long, hard fight, one where his endurance would be just as important as his power. We just have to be ready for the opportunities, but no, I never really thought about that. We're active. We just want to be active, and keep fighting whoever. Otherwise, we're going to sit down, waiting. We don't want to wait. After sparring, it was time for mitt work, where Benavidez's precision and power were on full display. His father called out different combinations, and Benavidez fired back with lightning fast response as the sound of leather against the.
We just have to be ready for the opportunities, But no, I never really thought about that. We're active. We just want to be active, and keep fighting whoever. Otherwise, we're gonna sit down, waiting. We don't want to wait.
Pads filled the gym as he worked on everything from jabs and crosses to left hooks to the body and uppercuts. His form was perfect, each punch thrown with intent and purpose. His father's voice cut through the rhythm of the session, offering small corrections to make sure everything was flawless. The focus was clear, building combinations that would break down Morrell's defense and set up powerful counters. The heavy bag work followed, and Benavidez went straight to work, throwing brutal combinations and targeting the body. He knows that Morrell has a tendency to get hit, and he's planning to make the most of that. Each punch landed with a thud, and Ben's sweat was pouring down. But he didn't slow down. His body movements were fluid, and he made sure to move his head after every punch, always aware of potential counters. He was not just focused on power. He was preparing for the type of fight that would demand constant movement, and defense. Conditioning was also a major part of the day's training. Benavidez has always been known for his stamina, and he worked hard to maintain that edge. He hit the treadmill for some explosive sprints, pushing his cardio to the limit. He also spent time jumping rope, working on his foot speed and coordination, essential for closing the distance. And keeping up the pressure throughout the fight, there was no room for fatigue in his strategy. Every second needed to count as core work, including medicine ball slams and sit-ups, helped strengthen his body to take the punishment that comes with a high-intensity fight like the one he was preparing for. But perhaps the most important part of the day was the mental preparation. Benav spent a lot of time visualizing the fight, running different scenarios in his head. He was focused and determined, knowing that this fight could define his career. He spoke to his team with unwavering confidence. His words weren't just a reflection of his belief in his abilities, they were a testament to the work he'd put in over the course of his entire camp. By the time his final training session came to an end, Benavidez was physically and mentally ready. His team was confident in his preparation, and as they wrapped up the day, there was a sense of quiet expectation. The fight is coming, and all that is left now was to step into the ring and execute the plan they'd worked so hard to build. Benavidez is ready to make a statement, and the energy in the gym made it clear the showdown with David Morrell would be one for the ages. Great news for Benz's fan. He shed the extra weight he was carrying just a month ago. The transformation happened fast, and with another month to go before the fight, he could become even leaner. In the latest footage, Benavidez bears a resemblance to Morrell, but what truly distinguishes him is his crisp combination punching. Benavidez might run afoul of the Cubans with such an approach. Benavidez might be making a mistake by attempting to stand near and deliver his combos when Morrell hit strong. That aggressive style served the Mexican monster well at 168, where he overpowered aging opponents like Demetrius Andrade and outmatched lesser threats like Caleb Plant. But if Benavidez brings that same reckless approach against David Morrell or Benavidez, he won't just lose, he'll get knocked out. This is Benaz's first true test. For 11 years, he built up his record against smaller opponents. At 168, the flaws showed against Morrell. Things could get even uglier, especially if he sticks to his volume punching approach, as seen in his recent training footage. It is thought that Morrell's poor performance against Ravia Kid in his light heavyweight debut on August 3rd is the only reason Team Benitez accepted this fight. Morrell had his opponent in trouble multiple times during the early rounds, but squandered the opportunity by hunting for a one-punch knockout and instead of unleashing combinations. It was a costly lapse in judgment, one that exposed his inexperience against Benavidez. Expect a sharper, more disciplined Morrell, who has learned from that mistake. Benavidez fights straight up with a distinct flow, as if a faucet is switched on, and its stream is just going to gather strength along the way. His constant hitting might distract opponents, to the point that the referee has to intervene and halt the punishment he's administering. Morrell will try to counter that relentless assault with his compact high guard and well-timed level changes. However, even with his disciplined defense, Benz's unyielding pressure is like a rising tide against a crumbling seawall. Its sheer force wears opponents down until resistance becomes few. Benz's blows are undoubtedly powerful. However, Morrell's explosiveness makes him a one-hitter if the southpaw times his strike perfectly and lands a power shot before Benavidez sees it coming. He might just walk out of Las Vegas wearing 2 light heavyweight world titles. That possibility becomes even more dangerous if he's varying his levels and launching the punch with explosive precision. In straightforward terms, Morrell doesn't have the professional experience that Benavidez brings to the table. Morrell, meanwhile, has only competed in 11 professional fights and has never faced a world champion. The advantage of experience belongs to Benavidez, and it's by a huge margin. Morrell and Benavidez have been able to irritate one another more and more with time, and their animosity is sincere. However, Benavidez has a little advantage in this mental battle due to his previously noted experience, given that he has already defeated superior opponents. He is free to discuss and brag about anything he wants, boxing his own fighting words into action. Morrell can withstand shocking him in an upset. However, Benavidez has the advantage here, as well till then Benitez tends to be more fluid in his approach, occasionally dropping his guard to unleash his punches with rhythm. In contrast, Morel maintains a more disciplined defense, holding his guard at forehead height, while ensuring his chin stays well protected. It's still uncertain if he can handle Benz's relentless pressure, but on paper the Cuban fighter holds the edge in terms of defense heading into this music matchup. Let's go. This highly anticipated clash has been years in.
10 seconds. Let's go.
In the making, as Benavidez and Morel face off with more than just a light heavyweight crown at stake, the winner has the opportunity to solidify their place as a dominant force in the division, potentially climb the pound-for-pound rankings, and carve out a lasting legacy as one of the sport's brightest stars. For years ahead, boxing experts have collectively voiced their excitement for this showdown, with many believing there are clear routes to victory for both contenders. The odds makers share a similar view, pegging the fight as a toss-up. DraftKings SP Sportsbook has the odds set at Benavidez -190 and Morel +155. Below, you'll find an in-depth collection of analysis from the boxing community as they await the final verdict in the ring this Saturday night. Juan Manuel Marquez, boxing legend and pro box analyst, said this is going to be a complicated fight for Benavidez across the first few rounds. However, Benz's speed and the level of his past opponents are better than Morel's. Benavidez has shown us his speed, his power, and his conditioning, which will be very important and allow him to overcome Morel and win this fight by a decision. Stephen A. Smith's comments on David Benavidez versus David Morel Jr. reflect not only his admiration for Benavidez, but also the anticipation surrounding the fight. As a self-proclaimed huge David Benavidez fan, Stephen L.S. Benz's fearlessness in the ring, noting that he ducks no one and is always ready for a challenge. This speaks to Benz's mentality. He doesn't shy away from tough opponents, and he's consistently ready to prove himself at the highest level. Stephen said David Benavidez versus David Morel Jr. is a big fight. I'm a huge David Benavidez fan, and I applaud him because he ducks no one. He's ready to fight at all times. He is the Mexican monster. Sometimes I wonder if someone is going to hurt him because he doesn't really move. Benz's nickname, the Mexican monster, fits perfectly with the way Stephen describes him. His ability to take punches and continue pressing forward has earned him respect even from critics who might question his style, while Morel has the size, power, reach advantage, and speed to make this a tough fight. For Benavidez's experience is lacking, as he made his mark as an amateur, but only has 11 fights as a pro for a total of 54 rounds, coming off a lackluster performance against Revo Kids. It's tough to imagine him winning here against the more seasoned fighter. Palmer also points to Morel's lackluster performance against Rivo Caddick, suggesting that this fight will be a massive step up for Morel, facing someone with Benz's offensive firepower and experience. Palmer describes Benavidez as aggressive, high-volume puncher who can overwhelm opponents with his constant pressure. He adds that Benz's ability to make adjustments, switching between smothering offense and more calculated boxing, makes him a difficult opponent for anyone. However, Palmer raises an interesting point. Benz's first fight at light heavyweight did not go as smoothly as expected. He wonders if Benz's power at 175 pounds is the same as it was at super middleweight, which could potentially impact his knockout ability in this fight. Despite this concern, Palmer still believes that Benz's superior experience, combined with his overall skill set, will lead him to victory, likely by decision. He added this fight is a huge step up in class against an aggressive, high-volume puncher like Benavidez, who can smother an opponent with his offense, and yet also has the ability to move, box, and make adjustments. That said, Benavidez also left a lot to be desired in his first fight at 175, and you have to wonder if Benavidez has the same power at light heavyweight as he did at super middleweight. I'm not sure he does, but the top-tier experience in pedigree should win out here. I'm picking Benavidez to win this by decision. Meanwhile, Chris Monick said tremendous fight and kudos to both guys for taking it. Two reasons I favor Benavidez's experience and activity. Benz's pro resume is significantly better, and that matters particularly in the later rounds. That's also where Benz's motor will become a factor. I see this being a competitive fight over the first half, with David taking over to win a clean decision in the second. Chava Rodriguez from ESPN Deportes admits that predicting this fight isn't easy, recognizing that both fighters bring their own strengths to the table. He points to Benz's experience over the past few years as something that could work heavily in his favor, while he acknowledges that Morrell has the potential to pull off an upset. Rodriguez ultimately feels that Benavidez will take the victory on February 1st, leaning towards the experience factor being the deciding point in what promises to be a highly competitive match. Chava Rodriguez said this is not an easy fight to predict, but I believe that the experience that David Benavidez has gained the last couple of years will work in his favor. It's a great fight, and I wouldn't be surprised if Morrell won, but I'm going with Benavidez on February 1st. On the other hand, Keith IDC from Ring Magazine, and
this is a real-ass fight, and one of, I would really go as far as saying, the 5 or 6 best you could make in this entire sport. You know how good unbeaten David Benavidez is. The way that he's adjusted with his commitment to his stamina and his gas tank, and what he does to fighters in the second half when he starts going downhill with that volume and that power. And then you've got David Morrell Jr., who has such a cool and interesting backstory. The Cuban southpaw who relocated in Minneapolis, helped really build that or add to what is already an underrated and thriving local boxing culture and scene there. We see that when PBC goes to the Armory. But Morrell can really fight, and he was one of those guys who was trying to fight the best in the world that he could in his 4th, 5th fight, right? He picked up a interim or secondary super middleweight title very early on in his march. And even though he looked, got to be honest, a bit human in his 175 debut on a recent Riyadh Cizan fight card when he took on, I believe it was Hot Rod Kalajic, I don't necessarily hold that against him. This is a real matchup, and what Morrell as a southpaw brings is dynamic. Everything about him is dynamic.